Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Ada, Marka, the whole team, for inviting me to be part of this celebration. And I can't tell you how much I value the work that you are doing and how much I think it is part of a global movement. And so we're not just talking about Hong Kong, we're not just talking about China. I think we are talking about something which goes way beyond those borders. And the point of my presentation to you all today is to persuade you that what you are doing, the work you are doing, is an absolute imperative. It is absolutely essential for the future of our species. It's not a nice to have, it's not a kind of discretionary thing that we might be doing as a hobby. It is essential. And the reason is that we live in the age of hyperchange and disruption. So I'm not going to stand here and giving you top tips about to improve schools. I'm going to be talking about the big picture within which education can either flourish or can simply be part of containing and maintaining a system which is frankly about to destroy mankind. And I mean it as seriously as that. Yes, it's hyperchange. What does hyperchange mean? Change at a speed our species has never seen before. And if you're not persuaded by that, consider this. It took 400 years for the printing press to reach 50 million users. It took 13 years for television to reach 50 million users. It took 3 months for ChatGPT to reach 50 million users. And it is speeding up daily. And this is the world that your young learners inhabit. Not our old world, but the new world of which we can hardly yet describe the contours. But I do think that education needs to take account of some very urgent and profound challenges. Changes which are at work, which we cannot avoid. And I think they're in 3 groups. The first group, of course, is around the environment upon which we depend. You all know the seriousness of the climate crisis. And it was this year for the first, and by the way, the climate crisis is not something that's coming, it is here now. So for the first time, an entire nation has had to leave its home territory. The islanders of Tuvalu in Polynesia are now migrating en masse to Australia because their land is no longer inhabitable. And we will be seeing climate-driven mass migration on a huge scale in the coming decade. The second, of course, is biodiversity collapse, great extinction, which we are responsible for. And if you are in any doubt, watch any documentary by David Attenborough, particularly his latest one called Oceans. Terrifying, devastating, optimistic in some ways, but it gives you a sense of the scale with which and the speed with which we are wiping out other species. So that is the first set of challenges. The second, of course, is around technology. And there are 2 parts of this, I think. I'm not going to talk about artificial intelligence. There are many people in this room much more expert on that, and I hope Chai Ming will be talking about it in his section. But you all know that it is transforming the world of work. The labour market, which your young people will enter, is utterly shifted by the penetration of AI into it and into every aspect of your lives. But this is, I know this all sounds very catastrophic, but actually there is some good news. So with global connectivity, for the first time in our species' history, 8 billion minds are connected, as we have never been before. Some people will call this collective intelligence or global intelligence. And it has been the reason why we have been able to solve some of our most pressing problems. For example, the development of the vaccine for COVID was speeded up at a rate scientists couldn't believe because they shared data, shared research methods. They used global connectivity and big mind to solve our pressing problems. Of course, there are downsides to global connectivity too, but it is one of the changes that your young people face. And then there's some human problems too. This third cluster, the ever-present existential threat of conflict. And who would have guessed, Ada, 10 years ago when Ednovators was begun, that by this point in history, we'd be seeing 2 bloody wars, red in tooth and claw, and expanding in ways that we can yet not anticipate, distorting the shape of our planet. And I think, too, we must mention rising inequity, both within societies and across nations. We're not doing better on that, we're doing worse. The gap between the very richest in society, the 1%, and the 99% is growing. And across all of our age groups, a mental health crisis, particularly amongst young people, of depression, of anxiety, of dysmorphia, body dysmorphia. Last night, before I went to bed, bad idea, I read the Guardian newspaper from England, and the news is that 1 in 4 16 to 24-year-olds is experiencing a mental health breakdown and referring themselves to mental health help. Now, when we look to the ancients, we must understand that they could never anticipate what it is that we face. Confucius, when he thought about the purpose of life, didn't have to consider any of these. And the world that our young people face is utterly, utterly different to that of previous generations and that which we inhabit in our heads. So they know it. A recent global survey showed, when asking 10,000 16 to 25-year-olds their attitude to the environmental crisis, they said more than 3/4 of them thought their future was frightening, and more than half thought that humanity was doomed. What a thought to be a young person believing that your species is doomed. It's not all bad news. If you read one book next year, I suggest you have a look at Hannah Ritchie, who is an Oxford University data scientist. And her book, Not the End of the World, is a real thrust at saying we can solve our problems. It is possible. We must be optimistic, and we should be, because she groups the problems I set out there into a number of categories, looks at all of them and says, we have in our grasp the solutions to these problems. It is possible. But at the heart of that is how humanity changes the way we educate our young people. How do we educate? The question I want to pose to is, can we be good ancestors? This is the question that indigenous peoples across the world are asking, and I think it's the right one. Can we be good ancestors in everything that means? So I think innovation is an imperative. Why? Because this is our inconvenient truth. The truth is that our education systems fail far too many people. Most across the world, and I have the privilege of looking at many systems, those systems are designed for less than 50% of the population who go on to university. This is crazy. 50%. Everything is designed thinking about who can get into university and what goes on at university. It's not that that's unimportant. We need smart, academically, cognitively educated people, but we need everybody. Those who are succeeding, by the way, by getting into universities, maybe they can pass exams, as Ada was saying, but really, are they learning how to thrive? Really? In these new circumstances? And I would argue that learners are simply not acquiring the knowledge and skills and values that they need for the 21st century. There is a story, a narrative that underpins our education system. And that story is a very powerful one. I think it looks like this. 1, education makes nations more prosperous because it increases growth, usually defined as GDP. By the way, we should notice that we cannot have infinite growth on a planet with finite resources. Never mind, we carry on growing. So that's the first thing. Secondly, it's an individualistic endeavor. It's about competition for rationed goods. It's about competing, how to get into university, how to get entry into certain jobs, and for high social status. Success in education is really about getting qualifications. And by the way, the only qualifications that really count are academics. And getting into university is the key success indicator. If you haven't got a degree, well, really, you're second class. Now, I think that's pretty ugly, but I think it is the reality of the story that is told about education. And if you read a second book next year, I want to recommend to you Michael Sandel, a Harvard public philosopher who wrote The Tyranny of Merit. And in describing this story, he said, amongst the winners, it creates hubris. The Greek word hubris meaning an arrogant feeling that you deserve it. You know, you're smart, you worked hard, of course you deserve this success. But amongst the losers in this game, it creates humiliation and resentment. And that is one of the major problems that we face. So I think the underpinning education story is fundamentally individualistic. It's about individuals getting on in competition. It's economistic and it's competitive. And this story is taken for granted. It's common sense, isn't it? Just common sense. And it's immensely more powerful by being tacit. That is to say, it's not spelled out, it's just silently assumed to be true. Actually, it's not common sense at all, it's highly theoretical. That story is the human capital theory of education. It's neoliberalism, and we've been sold it as if it's a given truth. We need a new narrative, I suggest, a new story for education. One that captures a new purpose, and a new purpose which is connected to those big challenges I talked about at the beginning. I had a go at it in a book called Thrive, and I suggested that the new purpose of education needed to be learning to thrive, not succeed, but thrive in a transforming world. I'm aware that the term thrive does not translate very well into Chinese. What does it mean? It means growing to be all that an organism can be in concert with its environment. I hope that makes more sense. Doesn't mean being happy all the time. Doesn't necessarily mean being wealthy. But it means being connected. And what I realized, I'm sorry this doesn't show up very well in this lighting, is that there are 4 levels of thriving. It's not just all about individuals and individual competition and success. Because if the planet doesn't thrive, we are toast. We have had it as a species. And if there isn't global thriving, in other words, if there are worldwide wars, equally we cannot thrive. The next level down is societal thriving. We need societies and communities which are not disfigured by inequality, but which are more and more equal. And the most contented and happiest societies in the world are those which are more equitable. All the data show that. The third level is interpersonal. Can we make great relationships between ourselves, with our friends, with our family? Are we capable of making and keeping a friendship, keeping a partnership? And these, my friends, are learned skills. It's not just a matter of luck as to whether you can do it, you can learn it. But of course, the most important of all is that one at the end, the intrapersonal, within oneself. Does one have a sense of identity and meaning and purpose in your life? Do you know how to look after your own body and keep it healthy and well? So I suggest to you that these 4 levels of thriving are intimately connected, and it can't anymore just be about the individual. You know, some of you will know the work of John Donne, the medieval, or no, Renaissance English poet who said, "No man is an island, no woman either. No man is an island." So I think when we talk about thriving, we have to think about all of those levels, and that is an agenda for learning. That is an agenda for innovation, because it suggests that we need to be thinking about learning in all of those spaces, and right now we're not. We have a little well-being on the side, a little bit of social, emotional learning, but it's in the margins. It's not at the center of what we do, and that's where it needs to be. And this concept of regeneration has become absolutely central to thinking about thriving. What does that mean? Regeneration of the natural environment. We have to regenerate our oceans, our land, our air. We have to regenerate our economies, moving away from extractive economies and moving towards circular, regenerative economies. And we have to regenerate the human spirit. A great writer recently wrote, the greatest problems with our environment are not out there, they're in here, because the biggest problems for our environment are selfishness, greed, and apathy. Selfishness, greed, and apathy. And it is those which we must regenerate. I say that educators' business is the third of these, because it's through them that we influence the other two. What is the regenerating of the human spirit? Well, some people think about it in terms of identity, a journey to find out who you are as a learner and as an adult. It's a journey, not a destination. It has to do with your cultural history and your background that you inherit, but also who you choose to be, what you want to make your life, the finding of your own identity. It has to do with a sense of belonging to place, to tribe, to community, and it has to do with finding meaning and purpose. And we all know, don't we, that a major source of mental ill health is purposelessness, a lack of meaning in life. So these considerations, and this is the good news, have brought intergovernmental systems to think again about the purpose of education. And the OECD, for whom I occasionally work, has recently launched its flagship project called Education for Human Flourishing, another word for thriving. It's part of the High Performing Systems for Tomorrow project, and this is important, I think, because it elevates the status, and these are the nations that are involved. These are the ones who've scored most highly on the old metrics, and they have all come together and said, actually, for the future, we need to be talking about education for human flourishing and everything that that means. By the way, notice it includes the International Baccalaureate network of schools too. And they have been holding a series of convenings over a period of time to explore this idea. If we set a new purpose, what does it mean for learning in the classrooms, learning outside the classroom? What does it mean for how we change and how we innovate? Precisely the territory that Ednovators has been looking at for the last 10 years. If you think about it, Aristotle thought that human flourishing, this is 300 years BC, was actually the purpose of our existence. But a few things have changed since Aristotle thought about it. For a start, climate change. Humans used to flourish by extracting and burning the Earth's resources. That way now is our destruction. Social justice has changed a bit. Whose flourishing was he talking about when their societies depended entirely on slavery and women were possessions, basically? And then thirdly, waves of technological revolution, which he could never have dreamt of. What will humans become, perhaps when we merge with our technologies? So, though he had the right idea, my point is, we have to rethink what flourishing means in every era. And that conversation is a really good one to have. It's a really good one to have between teachers and teachers and teachers and learners. But the truth is, we are looking at two paradigms now. Two paradigms for learning, one which characterized the 20th century. What does it look like? Well, the purpose in the 20th century was economic growth and individual advancement, making it as an individual, highly competitive. The function was to transfer knowledge from one brain to another, and to sift and sort individuals into tracks. Could be the university track, could be the vocational track, could be no track at all, and good luck. But that's what the schools were for, and we are still complicit in doing that. And thirdly, the means were completely teacher-centric. Teachers control everything, know everything, have all the power. It's academics-focused, and it is terminal assessment, crude assessment, which grades and fundamentally excludes people. But emerging is a 21st century paradigm, and it looks like this. The purpose is thriving planet, people, and places. Not just individuals, but connectivity here. Thriving people, planet, and places. Its function is to empower learners and to release human creativity, because we need all the creativity we can find from every source. And its means are personalized, competency-based, real world. Real world, meaning entrepreneurship, meaning maker spaces, out there where things are really happening and kids start to learn in a completely different way. Now, I've characterized it like this, but of course they're not mutually exclusive. It's not binary. Knowledge transfer continues to be very important, obviously. How we do it is going to change as we go through the age groups. But I put it out like this to sharpen the distinction. And what we see is that schools, in the movement that you are interested in, are moving basically from the left to the right, but trying to inhabit both of those paradigms, and it is very uncomfortable, like riding two horses. So, as systems move towards this new paradigm, it becomes clear, firstly, that innovation in both pedagogy, how we teach, and curriculum, what we teach, is absolutely essential and urgent. And we need new workforce competencies, new skills amongst our teachers and our leaders to bring about this change, this revolution. And the work, this is why I'm so happy to be here today, the work of intermediaries like Ednovators and your other colleagues and social innovators across the world is precisely in this space. And the work of philanthropy in supporting what they do, but also promoting their ideas in public spaces to government and to anyone who will listen about how essential it is we shift the focus of education is equally vital. So, I think we need an education workforce for human flourishing. And that means some new skills on behalf of educators. Our teachers right now are not skilled up to do this work, and neither, I think, are our leaders. So to conclude, I'm just going to offer you a few thoughts about what those new competencies need to look like. And I was asked to do it by the OECD in support of that program called Education for Human Flourishing. And the paper has been published and has been discussed by the Directors General of all those high-performing systems that you looked at before. Now, what I'm going to put in front of you is not just me dreaming up a few good ideas. We had a good research team. We looked across the world at where are the signals of new kinds of teacher training, professional development for both leaders and teachers. And I'm describing what we found. I don't have time. They're going to drag me off the stage at any minute, I think. So I can only talk about the competencies for leaders, not for teachers. But if you are interested in the full suite, that's the paper to look at. Here are the new leadership competencies that we discovered, and the first might surprise you. The first competency is for leaders to learn how to create a new narrative, a new story about what it is they're trying to do. It is very interesting that if you are a leader in almost any other form of business or industry, there are now training courses for them to create their, you know the story, create the narrative, and you control what happens. And that's true in education too. But we don't think about how to do it. And so what we are seeing is head teachers, principals, and system leaders thinking about how to create a new narrative for publics about the idea of thriving people, places, and planet. Because it is only through persuading people that that is our focus that we will get changed, that we will have a different kind of purpose. So that's one competency. The second one is systems thinking, becoming systems thinkers and managing dynamic complexity. And there are some people here who are involved in the MIT project, which is about enabling leaders to become, in education, to become systems thinking and not just thinking in linear terms. The third one we discovered, and I say again, these are all programs of professional development in existence now, is about leading and managing innovation. It's a skill. It's learnable. There are new techniques, resources, drawn mostly from social innovation. And if you want to learn about that today, Louise Pulford is here from the Social Innovation Exchange, who has been looking at how to create resources and techniques and methodologies to enable people to innovate more smartly and with greater impact. So we think that principals need to learn how to lead and manage innovation in their schools. And it's not the same as doing research. And it's not the same as applying research from universities in your school. It's a whole different ballgame. And fourthly, developing agency. Feeling that you yourself can make change, but most of all, developing agency in others. But my friends, you will not develop agency in others unless you develop agency for yourself. So those are four. There are a couple of others I don't have time to go into, and a whole suite of new competencies for classroom teachers too. These are the key skills that we need to bring about the shift in purpose and the realization of that purpose. So, though this might sound abstract, it's not abstract. It is actually of vital importance, and I cannot stress that with all my heart, because it will support learning as if our lives depend upon it, because they do. Thank you very much for listening.